to give you a summary of a novel entitled The Portrait of an Artist by James Joyce. Before diving deeper into the story, allow me to briefly introduce the author. James Joyce is known for experimental use of language and exploration of new literary methods, including inferred monologue, use of a complex network of symbolic parallels and invented words, puns, and allusions in his novels. James Joyce was born in February 2, 1882 in Dublin, Ireland. His full name is James Augustine Aloysius Joyce. He died in January 30, 1941 in Zurich, Switzerland. He was an Irish novelist noted for experimental use of language and exploration of new literary methods in such large works of fiction. Now, let us talk about The Portrait of an Artist. With its genre-building romance and autobiographical novel that traces the personal development of the protagonist, usually from childhood through adulthood. It was written in 1907, 1915, Trairas, Dublin, Zurich, and first published in 1916 in B.W. Hodge's New York publication. The Portrait of an Artist tells the story of Stephen Daedalus, a boy growing up in Ireland at the end of the 19th century, as he gradually decides to cast all of his social, familiar, and religious constraints to live a life devoted to the art of writing. As a young boy, Stephen's Catholic faith and Irish nationality heavily influence him. He attends a strict religious boarding school called Carlow's Ward College. At first, Stephen is lonely and homesick at the school, but as time passes, he finds a place among other boys. He enjoys his visits home, even though family tension ran after the death of an Irish political leader, Charles Tewart Parnell. This sensitive subject becomes a topic of a furious political charge argument over the family's Christmas dinner. Stephen's father Simon is inept with money, and the family sinks deeper and deeper into debt. After a summer spent in the company of his uncle Charles, Stephen learns that the family cannot afford to send him back to Conglos, and that they will instead move to Dublin. Stephen starts attending a prestigious day school called Bilderberg, where he grows to excel as a writer and as an actor in the student theater. His first sexual experience with a young Dublin prostitute unleashes a storm of guilt and shame in Stephen, as he tries to reconcile his physical desires with the stern Catholic morality of his surroundings. For a while, he ignores his religious upbringing, throwing himself with a debauched abandon into a variety of sins, masturbations, gluttony, and more visits to prostitute, among others. Then, on a 3-day religious retreat, Stephen hears a trio of fiery sermons about sin, judgment, and hell, deeply shaking the young man resolved to rededicate himself to a life of Christian piety. Stephen begins attending masses every day, becoming a model of Catholic Church and self-denial. His religious devotion is so pronounced that the director of his school asked him to consider entering the priesthood. After briefly considering the offer, Stephen realizes that the austerity of a priestly life is utterly incompatible with his love for sensual beauty. That day, Stephen learns from his sister and the family will be moving once again for financial reasons. Anxiously waiting news about his acceptance to the university, Stephen goes for a walk on the beach, where he observes a young girl wading into the tide. He is struck by her beauty and realizes in a moment of epiphany, and that love and desire of beauty should not be a source of shame. Stephen resolves to live his life to the fullest and vows not to constrain from the boundaries of his family, his nation, and his religion. Stephen moves to the university, where he develops a number of strong friendships and especially close with a young man named Cranley. In a series of conversations with his companions, Stephen works to formulate his theories about art. While he is dependent on his friends as listeners, he is also determined to create an independent existence. Liberated from the expectations of friends and family, he becomes more and more determined to free himself from all the limiting pressures and eventually decide to leave Ireland to escape them. Like his namesake, the mythical Daedalus, Stephen hopes to build himself wings on which he can fly above all obstacles and achieve a life as an artist. Be with me as I identify the in-depth factors of this novel. The narrator is anonymous and speaks with the same voice and tone that Stephen might. Point of view. Although most of the portrait of an artist is in the third person, the point of view is Stephen's. As Stephen develops as a person, the language and the perspective of the narration develop with him. We see everything in the manner in which he thinks and feels it. At the very end of the novel, there is a brief section in which the story is told through Stephen's diary entries. This section is in the first person. Tone. The tone is generally serious and introspective, especially during the Stephen's several heartfelt epiphanies. Temporal setting, 1882 to 1903. The special setting, Romero, Dublin and the surrounding area. Protagonist, of course, Stephen Dedalus. Major conflict, Stephen struggles to decide whether he should be loyal to his family, his church, his nation, or his vocation as an artist. Motifs, music, flight, prayers, secular songs, and Latin phrases. Foreshadowing, Stephen's heartfelt emotional and aesthetic experiences foreshadow his ultimate acceptance of the life as an artist. Additionally, Joyce often refers to Stephen's vague sense, even very early in his life, and thus a great destiny awaits him. Now let us discuss the theme of the novel. First, we have soul and body. The gap between soul and body means a great deal to Stephen during childhood and adolescence. As a child, Stephen notes countless particular sights, sounds, and smells, and interprets them with a great tenderness and seriousness. They seem to lead him into deep his memories and his understanding of the world. In this way, body and soul are naturally connected for Stephen as a child, but Stephen also shies away from many social activities, preferring to keep to himself and attend to his thoughts and daydreams. He distinguishes between extroverted activity, in which his body interacts with others, and introverted activity in which his soul communes with itself. Stephen's religious education reinforces the soul and body split. He has been taught since earliest childhood that premarital sex is a grave and a shameful sin, so he perceives his adolescent's sexual longing as a sort of insubordination of body against soul, an appealing perversion he must keep hidden at any cost. His secret lust, vague ambition, and keen poetic vision create a strange and witty inner world that does not often correspond to the shrill, dirty, practical world of city, school, and family. Though he often feels burdened by his ghostly inner life, he seeks to protect it from dogmatic external influences. When he tries to control his body and elevate his soul through meticulous religious practice. The formulaic religious teaching ultimately fails to leave any permanent mark on his inner life. The culmination of his religious crisis seemed to mark the reunion of the soul and body. The senses, the call of the life of his soul, turns Stephen away from the priesthood. Fuel his article ambitions and the restore of inner world, the senses of the body, the same senses that fuel his lust. But when Stephen arrives in university, he carries the split into his rather antiquated aesthetic theories. He brags that he will try to fly by the nets of nationality, language, religion, but before he becomes truly free, before he can repair the antagonism between soul and body, Stephen must create an aesthetics for his own. This new aesthetics, embodied new portrait itself, will be one that does not privilege unity over diversion, thought over feeling, and purity over reality. Innocence and experience. Ideas of innocence and experience, of change and maturation, are central to every Cantor's roman, a novel that narrates an artist's growth and development, of which portrait is one. In Joyce's novel, the theme of innocence and experience structures the remaining four themes, because in each case the novel traces the child to a dark arc of Stephen's shifting perspective. That is to say, when we talk about portrait, we are always talking about the evolution from the innocence to experience. Stephen's own idea of innocence is deeply influenced by Christian notions of purity and sin. Throughout the book, he identifies innocence as a sexless, lastless existence of life, a child of a celibate experience. On the other hand, is a fallen condition filled with doubt and shame. For example, he imagined that Emma was innocent as a young girl, but after a sexual awakening, he is humbled and saddened with the dark shame of womanhood. Innocence for Stephen also denotes a kind of simple-hearted direct relationship to the surrounding world. Stephen's adolescence is marked by growing isolation, a spiritual alienation from friends and family. When he recalls the sensory vividness and immediacy of his childhood, and when he listens to the story of easy companionship from his father's youth, he felt that his innocence has disappeared, that the child Stephen has died. The two notions of innocence are closely connected because to a large extent it takes Stephen's sexual shame and drives him away from others. To hide his shame, he retreats into a selective inner world. Shame of the body also complements and disturbs Stephen's relationship to sensory experience. By the end of the novel, though Stephen's religious anxieties start to diminish and the sensory life seems to grow brighter once again. Innocence usually dives away to experience. In Stephen's case, experience also gives way to innocence. His soul had arisen from the grave of the boyhood. Order and senses. During his childhood, Stephen lives by his senses. He understands the people and things around him only by the way they look, sound, smell, or feel. The novel suggests that the child is Stephen, his mother is her good smell, and nighttime is the chill of the sheets. His attention always veers toward detail when he learns that Simon Monan did something forbidden and homosexual with some other boys. He can only understand the news by thinking of Simon's nice clothes and fancy candy. He has trouble with abstraction and categories. He does not clearly understand the meaning of the York-Lancaster competition in his math class, but he thinks intently to the colors of the handkerchiefs and the word cards. When he tries to think of the idea of God or the organization of the planet during the study hall, it made him feel tired, and he focuses instead on the colors of the map. In his adolescence, Stephen remains preoccupied with sensory details, but his relationship becomes much more troubled. As he develops abstract thinking, he begins to ask himself large questions like, are priests always good? What is sin? What is greatness? What is Ireland? The question forces him to try to order and interpret his experience, which reveals puzzling contradiction and unintelligible variety. And despite his masturbation, his talent for observation and surpasses his interpretative abilities. In other words, he sees and hears the smell of a great deal, but he can't quite make sense of it. For relief, the first turn to old novels and poetry, which present a somewhat simplified and romantic picture of love and honor, and then turns to religion when it's rigid and regallable rules, and finally to academia and the state texts, which also provide framework for understanding. None of this is quite faithful to Stephen's actual experiences, which always exceeds the framework with intense, mysterious sensory and emotional detail. By the end of the novel, Stephen is ready to leave behind the mistakes of his adolescence and to create a new framework, to encounter for a millionth time the reality of experience. Religion, nationality, freedom. Stephen grows up in an atmosphere of political and religious controversy. The late 19th century was a turbulent time in Ireland. The beloved separatist leader Parnell exposed as an adulterer and condemned by the Catholic Church in 1891, divided the nation just as he divided the daedalus Christmas dinner in the novel. Throughout his childhood and adolescence, Stephen feels the pull of worldly causes. Hears a chorus of voices instructing him to join this group or that. But as he becomes more and more absorbed into his elaborate inner life, he determines to ignore the voices and pursue his own thoughts. Though religion briefly gives him respite from shame and confusion, he finds it impossible to confine himself to the narrow religious perspective. When he turns away from religion, he feels a soaring sense of freedom. Similarly, he turns away from the conventional Irish nationalism and other popular political causes into waiting that they will construct his intellectual and emotional life. Yet, though the feminism of his compatriots does not appeal to him as he aspired to express with his writing another, subtler sort of Irishness, the forge and the smithy of my soul, and uncreated to concise of my race. That would be all for the Portrait of an Artist by James Joyce. Thank you for watching.